Okay. Good. So let's go back here. Hi, everybody. I just got a text from Stephen that he's helping Blanche log on, so he'll be with us shortly. All right, I'm going to start the webinar part of this, which should let the attendees into the attendee part of the Zoom. Right now, that appears to be just Paul. Whoops, nope. Okay. There's Catherine. Hi, Amir.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Mark Diller. Nice to meet you. Of course, this thing goes up now. The co-chairs of the committee are navigating technology, so if we'll all be patient for a minute.
Sure, no problem.
I don't know about you guys, but I continue to have a landline solely so that the telemarketers have somebody to call. I guess Blanche is having her troubles because Steve just texted to say he's still working on it. Yeah, they're working their way through it. They apologize. They'll be with us as soon as they can. Blanche is having a little login trouble, I guess.
I'm here.
Yay! Hey, Blanche.
This is an adventure. Every meeting is something new.
Yes, indeed. Well, we have both of our co-chairs here. Stephen's muted, but he's with us as well.
Okay.
So I will now fade into the background and just look for texts. Take it
My
away.
apologies. My apologies.
I'm going to, I've joined the Geek Squad, you guys should know, so I've gotten quite good. I've said the day that I'm helping people get onto technology is it's a different day, but I guess, Mark, that's what we have, right?
Yeah, well, a year ago this time I wouldn't have been able to spell Zoom, so we all have to come up. It's a new world. Anyway, take it away, you guys. I'll shut up.
Well, let's jump in. I think that we've got a little bit of an adjusted group here today for a couple different reasons. One, to let you know, is our second speaker, unfortunately, we're going to be rescheduling. There was some issues. It was a difficult week in education. long story short, we're going to reschedule for another day, which makes us as happy as clams for our first speaker, and it'll give us a lot more time. And I did get a couple peppers of a handful of committee members. There's just a lot of there's a education meeting with the DOE, so a couple people chimed in. So I think we'll probably have a little bit of a smaller team, which will make it very intimate, and we will get to ask lots of questions about the libraries, which everyone here is super excited about. So what we say is it will be quality, not quantity today. So that's the method. So first we want to thank our speaker, and I'm going to, I guess we were trying to figure out, is it Amer? I look at the name, I'm not fluent, so I like a couple more vowels when I see a name, but could you give us some direction?
Sure, yeah, it's Amer. You were super close.
All right, inches there.
What's the last name, Amer?
It's Kotb.
Kot. Okay.
Yeah, that one's a little harder to say, so.
The library is good for getting foreign names and strange names. Every year we have a different strange name, and they're all charming.
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, I'm going to stick to Amer. It's a lot easier for me to say. Okay. But we have a great. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a little bit of structure of the meeting. I'm going to give it to Blanche to sort of introduce you and kind of get into it. Her passions, libraries. So I'm going to let her take a little bit more control of that. What I will do is the general process of the meeting is, Amer, is we're going to give you a little time to kind of speak, talk about your role, and various different topics. I think the ones that we're interested very much is whether it's an update, but kind of how libraries are working within COVID has always been, these times are interesting. And again, I'll let Blanche dive in a little bit more. I do have a little, I don't know if Blanche has it, but I do have a little bio, so I'll introduce you, and that is you are with the Government Relations and Community Affairs of New York, the New York Public Library. And I think we would love to hear about the expanded role of libraries and services for the community during COVID, and I'll let Blanche speak a little more. But we're going to give you some time to speak, and then we'll go around and let each committee member generally ask a couple fabulous questions. We'll let the audience as well, or our participants, as we say. And I think the goal here for us all is to educate ourselves on the work you're doing in the space itself. I do want to thank Bev today, who's taking notes, and I guess I didn't realize that I did put 2 and 2 that Bev takes a lot of notes. So she made it clear to me on her response back. So we'll take that into future consideration. Sometimes everything doesn't compute, but we have been rotating around, but I want to thank her. And we always give the note taker the first question, so you do get a little bit of a good spot. So with that, Blanche, do you want to? I'm going to hand it to you to sort of introduce into Amer.
Okay. Amer, we want to welcome you because I know you've been trying to present to the board for some time. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, it hasn't worked out, but we certainly welcome you here this evening. And I happen to be a big library fan. I think a lot of people are, but I am particularly fond of libraries for whatever reason. And I live right around the corner from Bloomingdale, so I have a particular affinity for that library. But what, in reading about libraries, in various publications and newspaper articles, when a lot of our institutions are failing us somewhat, it seems to me that libraries are picking up the slack and doing a lot more things than we traditionally think of libraries as doing. I like to say it's not just books. Libraries have gone into areas and are providing services that we never associated with libraries. And Amer, we would love to hear from you as you have written about them, those services. Expand on it for us and tell us a bit more about what libraries are currently doing and will probably do going forward. Mm-hmm. So the floor is yours, or the carol is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for such a welcoming introduction. It's very nice to meet everybody, and I'm very happy to to be here virtually, tell you a little bit about what we've been up to at the library the past several challenging months. So obviously, these are unusual times, and the first thing I want to say is from the very beginning, we have taken the threat of the virus to the public and our patrons and our staff very seriously. And that's why we were actually one of the first major, you could say, agencies or institutions to close, even before schools closed, because we felt the threat was that big. At the same time, we very quickly pivoted to getting a lot of digital offerings out there. And so those digital offerings weren't just about getting people the things that they always got from the library. And so I'm talking about digital collections being available, or things like our Tech Connect classes, or career counseling, or scan and deliver for research libraries. It was actually we were also trying to reach people who had been adversely impacted by the pandemic. And so we also had a community resources page that had things like information and ways folks who may have been now facing evictions, for example, from their homes, or food insecurity, or may have lost their jobs and need help with unemployment. We had a whole slew of resources on that front as well. And so that was something we were very happy to be able to do very quickly. One of the things I liked the most, or two things that I really liked the most. One was a focus on parents, caregivers, and students who are now in distance learning or remote learning. We partnered with a company called BrainFuse that offers free tutoring for students K through 12 in both Spanish and English. And that was used very heavily. There were 40,000 interactions in BrainFuse within the first few months of reopening, and that's grown to, I think, about 100,000 since then. So that's something I like to tell people about. The other thing I like to tell people about is the Tech Connect classes, because there were a lot of people who did lose their jobs or looking for jobs during the pandemic, and they were looking for classes that would teach them coding, website design, even Photoshop, Microsoft Office, talking about advanced Excel classes, all of these sorts of things, Google Docs, free classes on a regular basis. And I can tell you, as somebody who was putting the word out about these classes, they were filling up very quickly. So our digital offerings were great, and we were happy we were able to get them out there. And I have a lot of statistics that show that people use them, which is awesome. We're really happy about that. At the same time, though, we're familiar with the digital divide. We know a lot of people don't have internet access still. And so while it was great that we got these services up and running, we know that there's people in their homes, particularly in underserved communities, that don't have access to these services. And so while keeping health and safety in mind and prioritizing it, and I'll talk about the protocols that we engaged in, we moved to reopen as quickly as possible in a safe manner. And so on July 13th, we reopened 8 branches for grab and go service, meaning that folks it was kind of like a curbside pickup for library books. For researchers were able to do scan and deliver, which I mentioned earlier, which meant that they could do a virtual consultation with a research librarian, who would then, based off of that consultation, send over materials that they'd scanned and send them through email. And then that number grew also. As things were going well, we opened more branches, and now we're at about 50 grab and go branches. But we know that that's still not enough. And so we also worked very diligently to try and get expanded service. And so I'm talking about computer access, internet access, this sort of thing. So this is what we called phase 2. And we knew that was particularly important to communities where students want to come in and do their homework, or patrons want to come in and fill out healthcare related paperwork, unemployment paperwork, et cetera. So we got that up and running, but within a few days, the spike happened. And first it was in Staten Island, which became a yellow zone. And so we rolled phase 2 back right away in Staten Island. And unfortunately, a couple days later, which was this Monday the 16th, we decided to reverse phase 2 completely. So we're back to phase 1. And that's unfortunate, but I share that to make the point that we're just as committed to health and safety and taking care of the public and our staff as we are getting services out there any way we can. And we're constantly thinking of new ways to get stuff out there and reassessing our plans. So, we hope, we don't have a date for reinstating phase 2, but we are, like I said, constantly reevaluating and hoping to get that up and running. Very quickly, just a last one or two things I wanted to share that we've been up to too during the pandemic. We've been working with the city and communities directly to play a positive role in the pandemic response and stop the spread. So, one thing we did was we partnered with the city to provide COVID testing centers at our closed branches, test and trace centers. We're currently in talks about learning labs where parents can bring their students for childcare services, not provided by our staff, but through partner organizations. And probably the thing I'm most proud of is our summer reading program over the summer, which we launched. It was digital, but my team, understanding the digital divide, actually distributed books directly to kids in underserved areas. And one of the ways we did that was partnering through elected offices. A council person or a state senator already distributing food or PPE, and we would just show up with our books and let them know and get the books out there. So that's a little bit about what we've been up to. We feel like Blanche mentioned very kindly, we've played a big role in the city's recovery from a lot of different crises, and we hope to continue being able to do that any way we can moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Howard, I wonder if you could expand a little bit. Now you're talking about citywide.
Yes. Well, across our boroughs of service. So Staten Island to Manhattan. Right.
I'm going to ask you a little bit later if you could pinpoint our particular area, our cluster there in CB7. But one of the things I found most interesting in reading about what libraries do are the communities you serve and service that we don't associate with libraries. I'm thinking about senior houses. I'm thinking about going into jails. I'm thinking about even giving space in the libraries for pre-K classrooms. I'm thinking about your mobile service. I know you have one mobile van per borough. So you are reaching people that we don't normally associate with the library serving. And if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, I think that some of the tutoring and the career services I mentioned are an excellent example of that. Getting a bit more, one area that I didn't cover as much was career counseling.
Right.
We still offer, one-on-one career counseling to anybody who needs it. Resume prep, resume workshops, how to write professional emails, that sort of thing has been huge. And the same, we also do financial advisory in the same sense. So that's one area. Other areas include, we do ESOL classes, we do adult basic education services. You mentioned our program at Rikers Island. We had 17,000 individuals through our drop-in English conversation classes at Rikers Island this past year. And we also do citizenship classes. So those are some of the examples that are top of mind.
All right. Now, when you say you do things like career counseling and financial advising, is that library staff or professionals in those areas come in, or are library staffs geared up to do that?
Yeah, it's library staff who are trained in providing this service. However, we also do a lot of different events. We've had a lot of Zoom events where we may bring in a former business owner or a current business owner who will come in and host a class on financial advisory. So I guess it's a combination of the two, really.
Okay. How are the mobile units working, or are they out of commission because of the pandemic?
Yeah, the bookmobiles would have been fantastic right now.
Yeah.
I've really saying that a lot from the very beginning. I think if we did stuff like the book distribution initiative I mentioned earlier, we should be able to get a bookmobile up and running. But unfortunately, the powers that be have made the decision to have them out of commission right now. But what helps is, anytime I hear from folks who are asking for it, requesting it, and Blanche, you had done that in the past, and I mentioned that to the folks responsible for making these decisions. That helps people see the need. So I'll definitely do that again.
Good. The COVID testing, was that on site, and who came to do that?
Yes, it was on site at our branches, and I believe it was healthcare professionals working with the state. So the same way some of the New York State, well, all of the New York State testing centers that are free, and you see different healthcare professionals working there, it's the same exact thing. It's just happening at one of our closed branches.
Okay. Okay. I don't want to dominate this, but I said I was a big library fan. Maybe some of our other guests and board members have questions for you.
If you like, Blanche, I could sort of, I'll move people around and stuff, and we'll get everyone an opportunity. I did have a couple questions myself.
Okay.
And then I'll go around and let everyone sort of have an opportunity. And we also have some audience participation. And so a couple things. So of the services, Amir, that you're talking about, how many of those, when the libraries are closed, you know, how many of those are available, not available? I've heard you sort of allude to some are digital. I just want to get a sense of during it, you know, when they're closed, and can you clarify, are they open? Are they going to be closed with the schools? I'm sorry if we're being a little repetitive.
No, not at all. So 50.
But I just wanted to understand services and how you're opening and closing, and then the services that are available when you're closed.
Sure. So currently, we have 50 branches open across the city, across our boroughs of service for grab and go, which means that folks can do kind of like a drop-off pickup for folks. Now, what I was saying earlier is that we had opened an additional 14 for expanded service last week, which we were very excited about. And expanded service meant photocopying, scanning, computer access, internet access. But then we evaluated the threat on the ground, the rising infection rates, and first we rolled it back in Staten Island, and then we rolled it back branch-wide.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. I just wanted to clarify. So
yeah, no, of course. And then, sure. And then our services, I think I believe that almost all of them are digital now. I mean, everything that we were doing in person, things like ESOL classes, things like the career counseling that I mentioned. So most of the things we were already doing are still there. And then we've added stuff that we weren't doing before. And we've seen the way people are engaging with this. And to add on this point or expand on it, we're really excited about that. So when we go back to normal or the new normal, we're going to keep a lot of these digital offerings. Stuff like the book club partnership we have with WNYC, immensely popular. Things like we also recorded a studio album called Missing Sounds of New York for folks who were feeling isolated during the pandemic. Things like that. We want to keep doing stuff like that, and just making digital library cards more accessible for people, and digitizing collections. We digitized so many of our research collections. Those are all new things that we weren't doing before that we plan to keep doing even when we're fully up and running again.
Great. And so the tutor program that you mentioned about, that was digital, that was going on at the end of the year, beginning of this year, to clarify?
No, so that's one of the newer things. We did on-site tutoring before, where a lot of our staff, children's librarians, adult librarians also were providing tutoring services. But when the pandemic happened and we saw distance learning becoming a new phenomenon, we entered a partnership with this company, Brainfuse, which is a full database of tutors. And that was something we were not doing before.
So I guess and thanks for clarifying, and I'm sorry if I'm sort of trampling through this.
No, not at all.
Teenage kid over here just walked in, is bothering me, just so you know. So it's a losing focus. I'm ignoring him right now, just but he's inches from me. I think he's getting the point as we speak. All
right.
If I seem to lose law. So the question is, how many of these services, or can we start to move some of these services digital? I mean, to me, it would be great to have some of these services, particularly for the tutoring. And the second part was just an idea. So one was, can we move some of these digital? Because I think that would be wonderful. There's just not a lot of resources from that perspective as we sort of fight with all the education challenges we're happening. Yeah. And then I had one idea, just sparked me as you spoke. Look, is it possible to do a class or to kind of help people sort of educate them on technology? I mean, one of the things that has been a problem is sort of helplines, how to help people that are having problems getting on. I mean, I don't know how you would do it, but if the library can sort of do a tutor course on, I think sometimes people are learning how to work with technology. I would just think if there was some resources or ways to do something, either an online session on, how to do a Zoom call or how to work devices better. My understanding is that there's still a lot of problems with that. And I do not believe the DOE is offering very much in that area. And I guess the question is, could you maybe coordinate with them to maybe help them if you have those services?
Sure. So on the first question, can we move these things to digital? I mean, my initial thought would be that we have moved a lot of these things already to digital. And there is not a significant gap between what we were providing before and what we are providing now on net, as far as our services are concerned. Almost everything that we're providing in person is available in digital and has been enhanced, which is why we are going to keep these enhancements moving forward. So like the tutoring is a great example. We didn't have BrainFuse before, we only had in-person tutoring. Pandemic happens, in-person tutoring is not possible anymore, but now we have BrainFuse. If, God willing, we get through this, when we get through this, we will have in-person tutoring and BrainFuse is kind of how we're thinking about it. And with regards to technology, we are doing a lot of that actually. So we have this whole program called NYPL Tech Connect, and it gets into exactly what you're talking about. How to do a Zoom call, how to, I think I was mentioning earlier, how to start your own website. If you want to learn coding, if you want to learn how to use Photoshop, if you want to make your own podcast, stuff that's more leisurely, but stuff that's also more professional. Yeah, that's been super popular. Those classes are always full, and we hear from a lot of people asking us to offer even more of them. So that's something we'll be looking at.
Thanks. And I guess just to clarify the last part, I mean, I just know we had principals here. I don't know if it was, I think it was the last one. I don't know if there's a coordination. I mean, maybe taking and coordinating, with a school in terms of anybody who wants to join this session. I just think we're all got to try and figure out how to do more with, not less is the wrong way, I guess I want to say it, but it just seems sometimes our role is connect the dots with people in different areas. And I would just suggest or think that if you have these courses, somehow connecting with education as a whole and how you can help out, there's just a lot of holes from that perspective. I think we've identified that as the most challenging area. Sure. And if there's any role you could play, again, we have 3 schools here that were talking about how there was a lot of people who are still struggling. If you did one course and said and the principal or the PTA shot out and said they're going to be doing something from the library that sort of walk you through an ABC of such and such, it may be maybe something I thought would be interesting.
Sure. No, that's a very good point. And I do think the collaboration could be better. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Just quickie, I'm sorry, Blanche, quickie question. Mm-hmm. How do you promote what you do in the various communities?
Sure.
Because so many people don't know that libraries offer these services. Not every library offers everything, but in a community, how do you project yourself and how do you promote yourself?
Sure.
Services.
Yeah. So we're working in a, sorry about that. Just a second here. So some stuff in the oven. All right. So yes, we are constantly communicating on several different fronts in the interest of reaching communities directly. There's a couple different mediums where this is happening. The first one is through our wonderful branch staff who have been great resources for their communities. And what happens is my team will put together talking points on some of the things that we're up to at a high level, and we'll connect with the branch staff and sort of let them know what those updates are. And then, we work with branch staff to make sure, for example, that all the community boards are covered. So over the summer, when we launched phase 1 of reopening, our team tracked to make sure that every single community board was reached and that these updates were shared. As you shared, Blanche, I tried to reach CB7, but we didn't ultimately make it work out. So that's one medium where it's happening. Another medium is we have a lot of different newsletters that we send out regularly that folks sign up for. So there's NYPL Connect, which is kind of high level, all the different things that we're up to. We have NYPL Kids, which focuses specifically on resources for students K through 12. We have a newsletter actually for the Tech Connect classes that I talked about. And we have a research newsletter. So that's another way that we go about it. And really, I feel at least that we have a very solid relationship with our branch staff. So we hear from them a lot. They hear from us a lot. And, a lot of times they forward us emails of people from the community. They're reaching out to them, and we do the same. So I'd say it's a combination of a few different channels of communication.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's go around the horn. And as we said, Bev, you have first honors. So jump in.
Yeah, I was interested in how NYPL has been impacted in its services by the budget constraints that the city's experiencing. And if you could speak to that. I was very heartened to hear that you feel that most of the services you provided previously are now still being provided in another mode, which is good to hear.
Yeah.
However, we all know how difficult the year has been for city agencies across the board, and would like to hear what you have struggled with there and what has been the impact on you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think obviously our costs have increased, and one of the biggest areas where we've been spending more is technology for remote work for staff, environmental consultants, PPE, thermometers, cleaning protocols. Those are all areas where we're spending a lot more, obviously. And the other thing is that our budget for staffing is a little bit lower as well. So we removed 95 full-time positions and 460 hourly staff to match with decreased service levels in FY21.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the numbers?
Yeah, sure. 95 full-time positions and 460 hourly staff to meet decreased service levels in FY21. And then we've also reduced our budget for library materials, security, office-related expenditures, professional services, staff training. So those are kind of the areas where we were hit the hardest. But overall, we have been able to maintain the overwhelming majority of our staff and the bulk of our essential services, which is our number one priority. Now, we know pain may be coming in upcoming budgets, so we don't know how long we'll be able to do that. But for now, that's the state of affairs.
Question on the staffing reduction.
Mm-hmm.
Are these furloughs, or were the staff actually severed from service? Are they on furlough pending phase 2 and maybe phase 3? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Or were they released completely?
Furloughed. They were furloughed.
Okay.
There was a very small number of full-time non-union staff, 5, who were not furloughed, but placed on hold.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What we're going to do next, I see, Shelley, your hand up, but we want to get it. We have a panelist that's from a local perspective. So Ashley, I think, who is from one of our local St. Agnes branches. Mark, if you could handle that, I think we can get some more feedback from a local perspective.
So I'm promoting Ashley to panelist, and she should be able to unmute and even share camera if she wishes. And I think she's with us.
Hi, I'm with you. I wasn't really preparing to speak, but I can just tell you what we are offering on the branch level to really anyone. We are doing one-on-one computer sessions mainly right now. We're focusing on ebooks, we're focusing on databases. If the demand is there, we will definitely offer more, but the demand needs to be there. I know I shared my email in the comments. Our children's librarians are also they have at least 1 or 2 weekly virtual class visits scheduled, and they are looking for more. So if you know of any school principal, you can reach out to me and I will share their email addresses, and they will get anything scheduled. They can do database classes, they can do basic literacy, how to search the internet, information literacy classes. As I think Amar was saying, we might be remote, but we are still there. We are trying to have a very strong presence in the community. We're trying to offer as much programming as we can virtually. And we hope to see some people there. I mean, does anyone have any questions for me? Like I said, I wasn't planning on speaking tonight.
Well, we're gonna get, if you could stay with us, we're gonna kind of go around to everyone, and if anybody has any specifics from a local perspective, then we'll make sure that we identify yourself. But we appreciate you giving your perspective.
You're welcome.
And I think Cindy mentioned that she wanted to give sort of an update from a recent update that's relative as well. Mark, can you make that happen? The man behind the screen.
Sure can, and I'll just mention while I'm doing it that Carmen is now with us from West Prep, and she may be one of the ones wanting to connect with Ashley. So perhaps Ashley could put her email address in the chat again, but we'll also look forward to hearing from Carmen as well. But meanwhile, I'll stop. Where did it go? Here we are.
I think we were going to promote Cindy because I think
Yep.
she mentioned that there was something relative to add.
Great. So Cindy, if you could unmute.
Yep. Hi. Hello, everyone. This is actually very relevant to what you've been talking about. So Councilmember Rosenthal had a hearing of the Women Joint with Youth Services Committees yesterday. And at that hearing, we learned that DYCD, which runs the K-8 Learning Labs program, will add the St. Agnes branch to its list of sites. We just found this out yesterday. That'll be adding it to the only 2 sites that we have now on the Upper West Side. The Gertrude Ederle Center for 3K pre-K has already filled 30 seats. And the YMCA, which is for K-8, not sure the status of the seats there. And we were told by DOE that it would be set up by the first of the year at St. Agnes. So that's the latest information, and it kind of relates to libraries even. That's all I have.
Stephen, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I can't figure it all out. But so I thought we could get back to some questioning. I know Shelley, you had your hand up a few times. I see other people up, and we'll make sure we get to everyone. If you've got some thoughts, Shelley.
Okay, I had a question from an 8th grader who couldn't go on tonight because he's doing his homework, not here, next door. And I guess it's local. He has a research project due, and he can't do all online sources. How does he get books and other research material from the library?
That's a good question.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah,
I can answer that question too.
Go for it, Ashley.
We are in our grab and go locations. If he doesn't know what he's looking for, I recommend calling our Ask NYPL service. It's just 917 Ask NYPL. He can talk to someone either through general information or patron accounts, and they can help him find books specifically to put on hold. and he can pick them up at his nearest grab and go location, which would probably be Riverside or it would be Morningside Heights. If he also has a subject, we're offering something called shelf help, that he may be able to get help that way too, where they're going to get 5 books, and he could specify, I need 5 nonfiction books around this grade level in this subject. And the librarians at that branch will do the best they can to help fulfill his request. So, I mean, so there's kind of the 2 options. Yes, it's harder than what it is in the past, and it might not be like as instant as it had been, but we are doing our best that we can. And if he knows how to use the library catalog, he can place books on hold and again get sent to his nearest branch.
Thank you.
But actually, could you repeat, there is some live person that he could speak with? And
That is
find for that person what his research is about, and that professional can direct him to go ahead.
That professional, it's our Ask NYPL telephone reference department.
Yeah.
Is actually how I'm spending most of my remote work. But if he calls and just says, I need 1 or 2 books on the Civil War, I'm an 8th grader, can you just put any 2 books on hold for me? They will be able to help him.
Suppose the question is broader and he says, what books would you recommend? This is my topic. Can the person recommend some books?
That would be, I mean, we would do a search in the online database and see what's available.
Okay.
But if he's wanting, I mean, it's kind of would be the same thing where we would be searching, we would be making recommendations on what we think he should be putting on hold that would hopefully help in his research project. And it is part of like the reference interview to help narrow down and actually find out kind of what a person's actually asking in their question. So like the Civil War is very, very broad. We might like ask more qualifying cases to help get it more specific. Like, are you wanting life in the North, life in the South?
Right.
Are you needing primary sources? And we would try to go from there.
That's a great service.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelly, we're going to follow up and want to see the final product on that paper, just so you know.
Okay.
Get to
I'm doing the editing.
All right.
I'm working telephone reference tomorrow morning. If he calls, he might get me at 11.
Okay, I know Courtney, I've seen your hand up, so if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I just had a question actually about BrainFuse, which is very exciting and interesting, and I was not aware of that. A couple of questions for you on that one. One is just kind of in terms of bandwidth, in terms of assuming there may be, if awareness increases and you start getting more requests for that, do we have enough bandwidth? Is there a need for more bandwidth for that? Kind of, are there some limits or ceilings on that if the demand goes up? And then also, do you happen to have any data on who has been using it? Those numbers that you quoted on how many calls were pretty impressive. Do we have any data on who's using it? And on the flip side, what are kind of the communities that maybe aren't taking advantage of it that really could use greater awareness of it?
Sure. Yeah, so on the first question with demand and bandwidth, I have not heard anything about that being a concern right now. I think that's been one of our most utilized digital resources right now. And we do talk about limitations here and there, but that has not come up as one. So I think we'll be okay there. I don't have information on who's using it, but I could probably find that for you. So I'll look into that and see, I'll ask around, knock on some doors and try and get you that information. And
yeah, because like I said, it's actually the flip side that's interesting of who's not using it.
Right.
who might really benefit from it is interesting to me.
Totally. And that sort of gets back to folks without internet access, which is the simple answer for the moment, but I will definitely get you something more specific later, is underserved communities, folks living in housing developments who don't have hotspot access. These are people who could absolutely benefit from this resource, but they don't even have the internet access to get to it. But like I said, I'll get you something more specific.
Great. Okay, Natasha, I see your hand up. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I had a few questions. I was hoping that you could elaborate on your offerings for seniors in this time. I know that you were offering like senior fitness classes, and the book club, I think, was also quite popular. And also, you know, sort of a related point is that now that many more of us are on devices, from the youngest kids to the oldest adults, I was wondering if you also offer some programming on digital literacy, you know, things like cyberbullying or how to recognize financial fraud, those kinds of things, you know, just to keep yourself safe in, you know, the big bad world of the internet out there.
Right. No, of course. So on seniors, we do a lot of one-off events that target seniors. Sometimes they're book clubs, sometimes they're technical skills and that sort of thing, some of the tech stuff I talked about earlier. And then we have, I would say, a very high number of seniors attend our book club events, our book discussions. Sometimes we have events where we just say, hey, come and share something that you wrote or read and share it with this group and talk about it for an hour and a half. So we have a lot of seniors registering for those events. I know that we have a lot more targeted programming too, so I'll look into that and get you that information for sure. On digital literacy, that's been, I would say we address that kind of as a corollary, as in it's a lot of our Tech Connect classes touch on it, but I'm not aware of something that really gets to the crosshairs of the issues that you're talking about, things like cyberbullying, for example. So I will definitely run that up the flagpole and see if I can get some feedback on it.
Thank you. I also had one other question. You were talking about how you've made this real effort to digitize a lot of your collection, but are you also partnering with somebody like Google? You know, I know that they have, I think they have digitized something like 25 million books, mainly from university libraries, you know, which is something like, I don't know how rich your collection is in university press books, you know, which serve a different target audience and a very different purpose. And I'm wondering if there's any partnership with somebody like Google, who's already done all that work to sort of expand your library digitally.
We don't have partnerships with like major companies like Google, but we do have a great deal of partnerships with publishers and database collections and owners, and that's how we've been able to digitize so many of our collections. So we have, like, for example, you know, our database sessions. There were 219,000 database sessions in 2020 thus far, which is up 25% from 2018. So there is a lot there, and a lot of people are using it. And yeah, most of our partnerships are academic in nature or with publishers, but not with companies like Google. No.
Great. I see our esteemed leader, Mark Giller, raised his hand.
I wanted to let everybody else go first, and I see that Julian's got his hand up. So why don't we take the actual student in the room first, and then I'll back clean up.
I did want to make I wanted to make an announcement for someone. A friend of mine you have competition tonight, Julian, because we have another high schooler in the panelists. Arjun has joined. If you want to speak later, you can, but you have a fellow high schooler in here, and my friend had him join and just wanted to thank him for coming and announce it and give you a little jab at the same time.
Arjun and I actually went to middle school together at Booker T, and we're in the same Model UN program.
Arjun, if you want to speak later, I don't know if you can figure out how to raise your hand, but we're happy to let you speak when we get the panelists. So, but thus to Julian.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming to present. I've heard before about the Brainfuse program, and it sounds amazing. And I've used the library's digital catalogs for school projects too, so I'm really excited about all the things you're doing. I was wondering, last time we had folks from the New York Public Library come present, they talked about how like they tend to get less engagement from teens and from like older like students, not because of the lack of outreach, but mainly because of the lack of interest. And I was wondering specifically about like college and career programs that about the library offers, and like what the participation in those is like, maybe compared to pre-pandemic, if there's more use of those, and maybe what outreach is like to students in high school.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we do provide, in the same way we provide career counseling, we do provide counseling and services for college students or high school students entering college. So we do a lot of that. I'm not super familiar, so I should have mentioned at the beginning, I started this job at the end of February, so it was great timing for everything that's been going on. So I don't have a lot of information on what it looked like before. I could definitely look into that and get back to you. And the same with our outreach efforts. I don't know if Ashley might have anything to add, but for me, that would be something I would need to look into for you and get back to you.
I have a lot to add. We have a whole college and careers pathways for high school students. Before in the branches, I don't know the exact number, but they were hubs where they had extra funding to provide career and college assistance. They did SAT prep. They did helping figure out what you might want to major in. They did career counseling. They did a lot. It's all moved digitally now. Unfortunately, I have not worked in one of these branches, and so I don't know the whole details. But if you want more information, the manager of that department is Katrina Ortega. She can give you, currently 10 hubs. Someone just put that in, but we offer a ton, and it's all gone virtual. So outreach to teens, I am actually a former YA librarian. It's always been hard to get teens engaged. And I do have to say that during the pandemic, that is one thing that's suffered. Pre-pandemic, we did a lot of fun programs, gamings, art, manga programs. And unfortunately, that's just not something we're able to offer right now. A lot of branches are doing like teen book discussions, but again, it's really hard to get them to get teens engaged. But again, if like any high school, any school, no matter the grade, we are more than willing to do information literacy sessions. It doesn't matter the grade. Like I said, I used to be a YA librarian, so I've done these type of class visits before, and in a way it might actually go better virtually, where you can have command of everyone's screen. But actual programming right now for the pandemic for the teens, it's hard. At least that's what I'm hearing from my colleagues who are teen librarians. But one of the strengths is the college and careers pathways. And there should be a whole page for it on nypl.org too. Or again, the manager is Katrina Ortega. Her email is just first name, last name, Katrina with a K at nypl.org. I'm sure she's more than willing to answer any questions you guys might have on that. And I saw in the comments someone corrected me on the number of hubs, so she may have more information on it too. But we're definitely trying, at least in that aspect, to offer the same level pre-pandemic as we are now post-pandemic.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, we'll go, you can keep your, even though Doug raised his hand, Mark, we're gonna keep your spot line. So we'll go Mark, then Doug. I'm sure he'd be happy to wait for you to go first.
Very good, thank you. And there may be some more folks in the attendees as well. So Amr, I wanted to thank you for the wide-ranging topics that you're able to help us with, and Ashley as well. One of the things I was, there was a somewhat emergency meeting last Friday with the Mayor's Community Affairs Unit, joined with the Test and Trace folks, and they were picking the brains of everybody that they could get a hold of, including the Manhattan delegation of community boards, district managers and chairs. And what they were looking for, among other things, were places to have test and trace sites going on. One of which was, or one type of which I should probably say, was these self-test sites. So you go to a site, but they don't actually, there's no health professional there to actually administer the test to you and bring it back to the lab. They give you a kit where you can do it yourself. If our district office were open and sanitized, we would have done it ourselves. But unfortunately, there's no budget for the sanitizing. So we're a little bit behind the 8 ball there. They actually cut our budget by $12,000 in the last whatever. So I don't know if that's something that you can take back and see if they would be interested in using libraries to do, but it does seem like a timely thing, especially considering that today is the first day of classes, in-person classes being suspended. I will eschew most politics here and just say that it caught a lot of parents off guard and was not as well received as it might have been if there had been previews or a more detailed and more long-ranging plan in place. So anyway, that's something that's more to take back. And the only other thing I wanted to make sure is that because in an uncharacteristic moment, it's me, not Blanche, that's just bringing back to your attention the basement of the Bloomingdale Branch Library, of course, closed.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've been inputting my colleagues' brilliant ideas into a tiny box on a website about how the budget next year should be allocated. And one of our recurring wants is to take this moribund space that's been reclaimed from ridiculous dead storage in prime real estate and to push for it to be used as the kind of community center and flexible programming space that could facilitate a lot of the kinds of socially distant in-person grab and go things that we're hearing about from Ashley and from you, and also the kind of test and trace thing that we just referenced and so forth. That basement is a star waiting to be born. And so I would be remiss if I didn't at least give a quick shout out to that budget, that recurring budget priority of ours. I know it's probably coming out of left field, so I won't ask for a response, but I do ask you to keep that in mind when you bring stuff back. And other than that, we're grateful for your being here and for all the different ways in which the public library system is trying to soften a little bit the blow of this isolation. So thanks very much.
Sure, absolutely. And just quickly on the basement, that there is a $3.6 million project to create a dedicated team room in that basement. And it was originally on target for completion for June 2020. It got delayed because of the obvious, but construction did resume. So it should be wrapping up in the coming months. So I'll check in on that again. But
Amar, if I could just add to that, the teen space is on the first floor level.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Not the basement level.
Okay.
And that 3.6 is already budgeted and the design is in. and everything is there. What Mark is talking about, and I was hesitant to bring it up for the 1000th time, was the basement, the actual basement, which is the footprint, pretty much the entire footprint of the building. It's just there.
Mm-hmm.
So many of the things that you're talking about and have talked about could be accommodated and should be accommodated.
Right.
So if you could look into that, that's different to the teen space.
Got it. Apologize for that misunderstanding. I will absolutely run that back.
Okay,
No reason why you would know.
Well, I'm skeptical that Blanche didn't bribe Mark to bring that up. And my little story for this is I joined here. I'm not a lifer, but I've been here a while. My first meeting I ever went to for YEL about 8 years ago, Blanche started talking about this space. So there's quite an award in it for you if you can figure out how to make this happen. This is her passion project, and I see Mark knows what I'm talking about. Maybe Shelley as well. But the old timer, she wants this made. So
thank you, Mark.
Okay, let's go over to Doug. I think you are up, sir.
Hi, Amr. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm learning so much just about the connection and the synergy between the sister agencies at the city. And to Mark's point, I just happened to be speaking to someone from New York City Health and Hospitals on a real estate matter, who then said to me that they were partnering with their sister agencies, including the libraries. And that was pertaining to potential testing, maybe down the road, vaccination and things like that. So I'm happy to hear that physical space is being used. So I just had two real quick questions. One was a real simple question, which you mentioned that the bookmobiles were out of service. And I was curious to know how many of these vehicles exist, what type of vehicles are they, and are they being repurposed for anything such as, besides books and literacy, but also, you know, food, PPE, whatever the city might need. So are those vans or trucks or buses just being mothballed? So that was my first, and then I have a follow-up.
Sure. The short answer is yes, they are, which is rather unfortunate. I don't have all of the insights into why that decision was made, but I have expressed it on various community boards' behalf, the utility that the bookmobiles could play. So I will absolutely do that again. And I think, you know, with issues like this, the more they hear it from different places, the better chance there is that they'll re-examine it.
How many vehicles are they, and what type of vehicles are they?
So Ashley or Elizabeth may have a better idea, but I think it's less than 5, actually.
It is 3. There's 1 per borough. I have personally never seen one, but I've been told they're about the size of an Access-a-Ride van. So they have like room for, I think, a couple carts. 2 people usually staff them. And I know the bookmobile staff is working in the branches right now too. So they're not out, like they haven't been furloughed. They're working back in the branches.
Okay. Well, doesn't sound like a huge fleet, but to the extent that they could be repurposed for whatever needs are coming up in our city with food and PPE, et cetera. And the other question was, I guess you perhaps already covered it, but I'm through other meetings that we've had here, I'm hearing a need for people to understand how to get their setups. I've heard there's a lot of tech videos and tech classes that you have. So are they somewhat rudimentary? Because someone, you know, who really may literally need to know, here's your router, here's how you set it up, and this is what you have to do. Do you have those very basic classes, and do they live online somewhere so that at any given time that is convenient for parents and students that they can go on? And to add on to that, like on a local level, when the city distributes, well, they were iPads, but then computers, do they know, the city is distributing it, do they know exactly that this is what you should go to New York City libraries? Here's all this information you can use with and access through your new computer. and also the possibility of private partnership with, if you go into your local Best Buy or PC Richards, hey, here's what's available at libraries.
Right. So on the first question with Tech Connect classes, yeah, many of them are very rudimentary, but as I may have shared, I don't remember, a lot of them focus more on programs and software than they do, here's how to set up your router, for example. And again, Ashley and Elizabeth can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think the majority of them are for developing skill sets for using different programs and software. So that's a good point for me to bring back. As for what's loaded on the devices that we hand out through DOE partnerships and so on, I don't know that is included. I think it's typically, we had some challenges at first, but we were ultimately able to get Simply E on a lot of devices, for example, which is our digital checkout service. But we don't have much beyond that as sort of like, here's how to use this, for example. So that's something we could probably do more of.
I wasn't even thinking of loading it, which is even probably better, but I was thinking of literally like, hey, here's your device. And by the way, here's the website for New York City libraries. And this is all that's available to you in case they didn't know it, especially if it's coming from the city. But yeah. That we
do. So through the Simply E page and the remote resources, you can find that stuff. And there was a little glitch with that at first, but we did get it resolved as of 2 weeks-ish ago, I think.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
I want to just add, I think this is where you were asking about students being able to reach out to New York Public Library resources. This is when it's most important, the school librarian relationship. If the relationship existed pre-pandemic and it was strong, you're like ours was, we have our children's librarians, Sarah and Doug, who are awesome librarians. They were out doing class visits last spring and summer, and now that if the relationship existed before, we are trying as hard to continue on. We're trying to offer the same sort of information literacy type classes. And if the relationship didn't exist, we can do as much emailing as we want. Like I said, I was previously a young adult librarian, but it's sometimes if schools aren't responding or teachers aren't responding, it's hard to get your in sometimes with the school. So once we're in, then it's very easy to spread, like, this is our webpage, this is how you request a book. I can do that in a 15-minute class, but some of it's just based on relationships. And I worked over at Aguilar for about 15 months, and they had a lot of very strong relationships with the schools. So I'm assuming they're very active over in Community Board 10 because the relationships existed already.
Thanks. But and just not to belabor this point, but it really is one of the things that I think could really came out of it would make me happy. Even if it was done on, see, if you have a kid in the school, you have a DOE account, you sort of get a lot of updates. Even if one update was, know that your public library has resources to educate your kids and you on technology. I just think it would be a good idea. Again, we had a meeting last month, and what you constantly hear from us is one of the biggest problems is around people, the lack of devices to kids and trying to fill that gap, but also very disappointed that the DOE hasn't done a better job creating more infrastructure for this. And as much as you can plug and play or help out, or even just say, hey, if you're having problems with it, reach out to your local library and perhaps they can help you. I just think it would be a great idea, because that's one of the common themes we've been hearing over and over. And again, that's one way to do it. We get these emails when you have a student, and perhaps you could offer these services, and even that way they could do it. And again, as Ashley was saying, the more local you can get, that's great. But any follow up on that area, I really think would be helpful. Doug, I know I don't want to put you on the spot, Doug McGowan, but any questions? Because we're going to move to the participants. And
Yeah, no, Stephen, none for me. I just your last point I think is the right point. There's been conversation about demand and conversation about understanding what's available, connecting the dots. As a parent, I wasn't even aware that there were the grab and goes available. So I learned today something that I could now pass back to my wife and kids, who used to use the library, 2 to 3 times per week. So the demand piece and the connecting the dots to ensure folks know that you're open for business in the way that you are, I think is an appropriate follow-up.
Great. So Mark, I sometimes give it to you to, I think you've already promoted some people, but perhaps you can help me with sort of the panelists or to see if anyone wants to communicate.
Sure. So Carmen Reyes from West Prep Academy, which was of course the focus of one of our more recent previous meetings, is with us. I'm not sure if she has a question. I promoted Arjun just in case he has a question. And why don't I just complete the POCs and promote our one remaining attendee. So now everybody's in the same boat with us here. If you want to unmute and ask a question, if you need me to help you do that, I'm glad to do that. So Carmen, Arjun, or Allison?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say I'm happy to be here, and I'm very thankful to be listening in on these conversations.
Thanks, Arjun. Carmen, do you have anything for us, or have we covered it in the chat? And Allison Sellers, I'm not sure if you had a question. I just want to make sure that we don't miss out on you here.
Nope, nothing from me, but thank you very much for the conversation. It was really interesting.
Excellent. And I'm not sure if we Carmen, so I guess we'll move it back to Stephen.
Is it Elizabeth on the panel now? Did we give her an opportunity?
Elizabeth Palladino was, Elizabeth, sure. If you want to unmute, please join us that way. Otherwise, Elizabeth was helping us with information in the chat.
Oh, I got it.
One final thing, to Doug McGowan's most recent point, if I could jump in for a quick second, if there is a flyer or a couple of flyers for the offerings that that either the branches or the central system would like us to promote, we have an e-blast of a couple thousand folks. I'm going to wager that there's a parent or two in there, and maybe that would be a useful thing for us to do. It's most effective if you have a flyer that's in either a PDF or a Word document format, but even if you have a photograph or just a text, we can slam that together and get it out. I'll leave it to you to decide whether it should be done before Thanksgiving or after. But that's something that we would be happy to make available to you. And Ashley, especially on an ongoing basis, if there are things that we should be promoting, please don't hesitate to let us know. I know you're very good about coming to full board and sharing thoughts about what our local offerings are. But if we can reinforce them in email and print, perhaps they would have better penetration still. Thanks.
That would be wonderful. When's the next e-blast going out?
Whenever, I'd love to say whenever I decide, but truthfully, it's whenever the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications decides that it's our turn. So we can do one. We can do one tomorrow. We can do one on Monday. I think that.
I'll try to get you a list of programs tomorrow because I'm off next week, but I'll get you a list of what's coming up through the end of December, that at least that what I know of is scheduled and on our calendar.
That's great. And if I'm not responsive, that is your cue to get back to me.
Okay, sounds good.
Great. And Amar, for yourself, I mean, we always leave as besides maybe the suggestions that Mark made. I mean, is there anything that we can do to sort of help you this year or to advocate for you and the things that you're doing?
That's very kind of you to ask. I don't think so. I think it's, I really enjoy having a relationship with the communities that we're serving. So, it's, to keep things going. I'll put my email in the chat to have a nice back and forth with everybody here and make sure I get back to folks. And, things like the bookmobiles, that's stuff I want to make sure I can be, I can advocate for as much as possible. And no, that's about it. Just making sure folks know what we've got out there for them. And, we're still out here doing everything we can. Great.
Well, first of all, thank you for your time and all the information you shared. I also think that perhaps, let's stay in contact. I mean, I think, whether it's every 6 months or every certain amount of time, I think, it would make sense to get updates, particularly in a year like we have this year. So I wanted to thank you for coming. Appreciate your time. Our cyber claps for you. And thank you as well, Ashley, for coming as well. So we're going to move on to some other things. We'd love to have you. You're welcome to stay, but we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay. Well, what I thought to do is I know that, as I said, we rescheduled our next visitor speaker, I should say. So I thought maybe I was going to bring this up in new business. Maybe it gives us a little bit more time to speak about it. I think we're all aware of as Mark said, the updates in the school. Live teaching has now been paused. I have lots of mixed emotions about it. I also sent over, I don't know how many, particularly everyone on the committee, just some data points to sort of guide some of my thoughts. And I thought maybe to have a conversation about it, but I feel pretty strongly about this and may want to think about what type of action we may be able to take. I'll read off these facts for the people that don't have it, and I'll see as I know, and then I'll offer anybody to speak about it. But look, the in-person has been paused at the very least. The number, if everyone doesn't know, is that they chose back, I don't know if it was June, early on, that if the schools exceeded a 3% rolling day average, the positivity, the schools are going to shut down. To give some context, I think some maybe at the time that was a good, I'm going to say good thinking, maybe that was a time, but I do think there has been some guidance that has been out there that's been a little bit different. And I thought that number personally was, I was a little taken back at it. For instance, the World Health Organization, the WHO, their recommendation is 5% for the world. It should be closing under 5%. And I think if people are aware, our Governor Cuomo has gone on fairly public to say that perhaps that number should be reevaluated at the very least, or perhaps how they do that. Another data point I think worth discussing is that our schools have proven to be extremely safe. The data that I have is of a random testing of 71,000 students, 42,000 staff, 30,000 plus schools. Only 189 came back positive, which is a 0.18%. And the New York Times reporter sort of said it's clear that one of the city's top health officials has declared that the public schools are among some of the safest public places to be. So the data itself is coming in that the schools are very safe. And if you just look in contrast to others, Europe, which we don't necessarily have to model, but Europe actually has very similar things going on. They're not closing their schools up. I spoke to my friend in Canada before this just to kind of understand, because we all think of Canada. None of their schools are closed down. Matter of fact, all of their schools have been all open. So there's really no hybrid up there. They've been opening the schools. So I just thought to add these sort of data points. My perspective is I was disappointed the schools. I'm a big believer in sort of the hybrid approach and choice. And I was surprised, disappointed that the schools are closing. And that's where we're at. The other point that Mark brought up is just the continuing transparency and communication issue that we spoke to. This is all being done very, very last minute. you don't have to have kids to know how challenging that is, but when you do, it makes it a little bit worse. The impact that this has on people is very, very challenging. So, my feeling is to make some type of statement about it. I have some ideas, but I did want to open it up to other people. I just continue to feel just, disappointed is the least way I'll say it about what's going on. So I'm just going to go a little bit in order. I saw Doug first. We could have Mark, anybody who wants to speak, but maybe we'll just go around and talk about this topic.
Thanks. So I echo a lot of your points and feelings. I think the data that you presented, some good data points for consideration. In terms of what we would do about it, before discussing that piece, do we know, I think two questions. Did the last resolution that we passed supporting the principals in their participation in these types of decisions, do we know if principals in any way were involved in the decision, this specific decision?
I'll answer it, and I'll let Mark, if you want to add. My belief is no. This decision was made back, I think it could have been as early as May, and based on our conversations with our principals last week, they weren't even being asked any questions as late as September. I would be shocked, and I certainly don't think they were in the room the other day down at the mayor offices. I could be wrong if somebody knows me to be otherwise, but I'm pretty confident that's the case.
Then assuming that's right, which I think we all think is probably the case, then in terms of a response, and you probably already have obviously an idea of what it would be, but piggybacking off of our last resolution and the lack of involvement of individuals like principals in these type of decisions, to me would be a potential way forward if we were to think through and look to make some sort of statement. We made a pretty direct one in the last resolution that I thought was very valuable from a community perspective. So just a suggestion.
Thanks. Mark, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts here, and I'm going to distinguish them as process thoughts rather than substantive thoughts. First of all, there was a little bit of feedback on our resolution that we, in calling for principals to be a part of the loop, there was a reaction saying, well, what about parents? What about other educators? Obviously UFT is at the table in some fashion, but superintendents and so forth, and the CECs themselves. So a teeny bit of pushback, but the larger process point that I would say is that this is something on which I would think we would want to engage the community. My takeaway, by the way, from our meeting with principals, there was an undercurrent that was not expressed that I may be the only one that misinterpreted or misinterpreted it, but I got the sense that they were saying that if they had been asked, that they would not have endorsed in-person schooling because of the risks that it posed both to their faculty and to their students at a time in which everyone was certain that what did happen today would happen. And not being, so that's a surmise on my part. That's not a reason to do or not do anything. But I think that if we want to make a statement about this, we need to do this in something other than new business. We need to put it on an agenda, invite people to come and say yes or no, maybe even line up a speaker. And obviously we couldn't do that in the half an hour that the mayor and the governor finally figured out how to talk to each other and decided that they would go forward with the mayor's decision. So that's my process problem with this. I think that I would endorse the substance of the thoughts that you were giving, but I'm not sure that we're in a good position right now to make a statement that really does speak for the community.
Okay, well, I see other hands, and we're going to get to them. Two thoughts to clarify. I do Number one, we'll at the end, we'll discuss that. I understand your point. I may have a different perspective on that, but we could talk about it. And I would clarify, Principal Washington, I think, took a position that you had mentioned. I don't know if the other two advocated that way. And I believe Principal Washington took that position not necessarily out of safety, out of the fact that there was these series of decisions that put him in a position that this is where he was at. But we couldn't read into his mind. And I don't mean to, but I'm just saying, I'm not sure if this was a safety issue or I've got this many teachers, I don't want to bring substitute teachers in. It's, there could be a bevy of reasons, but I understand your point. I may have a different point, but why don't we go around and let everyone speak and we could talk about it and see if we can find something. Let's go Shelley and then let's go Julian.
Okay. I just have to.
I'm sorry, and then Bev. I see Bev, your hand up as well. So
I'm a former New York City school principal, assistant superintendent, teacher. I understood why the principals had hesitation because they're responsible for all the management of things, and they didn't feel that they were ready. Okay, but it happened, and when it happened, to the extent that it worked well, it was working well. Closing it now is a whole other piece. And I think the biggest demographic that's missing in the whole picture are the parents. And the parents are the consumers. And the children are the consumers, but the parents represent them. And the fact that there is no, to my knowledge, parent body advising this group or as a part of this group is horrendous in 2020, as it would have been in 1990 or 1950. Parents have to, are most concerned about their children and have the responsibility, primary responsibility for the children. And if they, every parent that I know, knowing about the 1.9 or 1.8 in the schools and happy with the hybrid model or whatever model they were using, no one is anything but upset or outraged that schools were closed today and are likely to be closed for a while now. So I think that there isn't some parent body represented among the group making decisions is just so bad, so bad.
So thank you, Shelley. I mean, a couple of things I'd say. I think Julian would take umbrage that he's not the client, but I saw him smiling when you said that. So perhaps we're the advocates too. Look, anything that we can only have meetings and hopefully invite everyone. You have your own committee and you hope as many people come up. So we hope that parents come and parent associations. I believe Carmen, who joined, was an outreach, who is one of the parent associations. So we're doing our best. But you do have some parents. I'm a parent. There's other parents that have kids.
Oh.
So I do think there is some representation, but we're always open to how to get more parents. Or
pardon me. I wasn't talking about this committee.
I thought you were talking before.
To the contrary, there are many parents here.
Yeah.
And grandparents. I'm talking about the decision the mayor and the union made. Maybe, what about where are the parents there?
Well, violently agree. And I would say, Mark, and we did add a last minute line in there that sort of said, ask for a more transparent process for kids, parents, everyone. And perhaps it wasn't a strong enough statement, but I know we did add that. And perhaps if we decide to do something, we'll make that a stronger statement. Let's go to Julian and then we'll go to Beth.
Just responding to Shelley a bit, I know I mentioned there's a few parent organizations that do exist. I do agree with you though that they haven't been involved properly, but the CPAC, the Chancellor's Parent Advisory Council, is an advisory board that's, I think it's meant to assume that role. There's a student equivalent of that, and I think both of the bodies aren't really, I don't know, taken as seriously as they should be. But I know there are also parents who sit on the panel for educational policy, but I don't know how involved they are with these decisions. So and then responding to one more point before I get to the point I was planning to make about why we had the three principals on the call last time and why I think it's important to understand. I think that one of the reasons that principals may have preferred to go full remote or would have wanted more advance notice or all of this isn't so much about safety, but it's more about logistics and scheduling. And my school is very fortunate. Over the summer, we thought this through, we thought this out, and the majority of students at my school wanted to learn remotely, and we could because we were high school students. It's a lot easier than other schools. But we set up a system in which we take all of our classes on Zoom. So even when we come into the school building, we still take our classes on Zoom in the auditorium with our teachers in separate places in the building, which is it's a unique plan. I think there's actually more and more schools who are doing that plan. But what it basically means is that there was no effect for us when we switched on today. Like I just attended all my same classes the way I normally do. Students who were in the building yesterday just attended all the same classes as they did in school from home, which they had been doing because they weren't coming to school every day in the first place. They were already doing days from home. So like that allowed the transition to be very easy, and that wasn't the case for other schools. And I also know for other schools, when they have remote learning, they don't get synchronous. When they have remote learning, they don't get synchronous instruction every single day. Especially, and I think that's one of the big downsides is that if for a lot of these schools going full remote, it means that students might not actually have like actual interactions with the teacher for days at a time, perhaps, and it's all just assignments posted through Google Classroom or whatever. And so I think that I just want to bring that up as a point. In terms of this issue specifically, one more thing I want to bring up about that, about remote. Sorry, my thoughts are all over the place here. But the other point I wanted to bring up about school closure is that the rates have been really low in schools, as Stephen said. But we are entering winter, and there have been lots of concerns. There's been a lot of articles about what's it going to be like with ventilation within schools. A lot of schools don't have MERV 13 filters. The Martin Luther King campus down the block is a great example of that. And what are they going to do when they need to have their heating on and they need to keep their classrooms warm, but they also need to like keep windows open to have proper ventilation. And there's already been classrooms where students are all wearing their coats like now in November. So what's that going to be like in January? So I just want to put that out there too. To be brief here, in terms of what we should take action with as a committee, I agree with Mark that it might be better to postpone until a future meeting. I think right now the decision's been made to shut down schools. I'm off the top of my head, I think I remember it being for 1 to 2 weeks. I think like they're not going to reopen. There's not going to have an opportunity to reopen until after Thanksgiving. So I don't think an immediate action taken by us tonight will have an impact on things. I think the action that we take, I think there's like 2 paths and we could pursue both of them. I think one path of action would be to go along the lines of communication and talking about the fact that, the decision was made incredibly last minute with very little, advance notice. And also like, we didn't even know if the mayor and the governor were on the same page about the decision being made. And I think that's a point that relates to the previous letter that we wrote. And we might not even have to pass another resolution to, write another letter about that. And another point to bring up, which I think would involve a lot more, necessary input from, stakeholders and people with experience on this, is if we wanted to make a statement about, this 3% threshold at which schools are closing. I know there's been a lot of discussion about how it feels unfair that, well, not unfair, it feels from a public health standpoint wrong that indoor restaurants and gyms are open, but schools are not, especially when schools have such a low transmission rate. And so, but I understand that writing a resolution saying that that percent change should be moved or should be altered is something that should probably involve some input from public health experts in some way or another. But I think that's another type of action that we could take as a committee, and we could take that maybe at the next meeting, and then maybe that would have an impact for future potential school closings. Sorry, I talked for a while there. Those are all my comments.
No problem. Bev?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Julian has said. I think, I'm not sure who said it, but the sort of summary of it was you can have the gyms open or you can have the schools open, but you can't have both. And it seems to me that our public officials have weighted a pro-adult rather than a pro-child regime here by essentially choosing to close all of the schools. I think the one thing I would like to know more about, I have heard that in many, if not most schools, the testing regime for students has been extremely frequent and effective at locating folks who are infected. If that is true, it would seem to me, and I think that the governor has in fact suggested something like this, there might be a more nuanced way of looking at a threshold, which of course would be important, but to have it for the entire city as a blanket doesn't seem to me to be aligned with the whole regional approach that our health folks have taken here in terms of different regions being treated differently, the red zones, the orange zones, the yellow zones. I mean, for schools, it was everything. And I just think that is totally out of kilter. And I do think an information session that brought together perhaps public health people and school people and had some sense of trying to come up with and parents, of course, and as well as educators, would come up with some kind of way of talking about this that had more kind of sense of reality to it in terms of what the schools are actually experiencing.
Thanks, Bev. And your point, I mean, I didn't even get to it, but I completely agree. A number across this entire system seems, at this point, counterintuitive. We've learned to think micro. We've learned to think local. I went on the map today. There's an area that I'll tell you schools closed. There's no schools closed on the Upper West Side. I don't think in our district. Most of the ones that are like red are in certain clusters. So I didn't even want to get into the next layers of the things that I think, but I think taking a different approach to my problem, and then I'll let go on. It's like, and we'll talk about the statement, and I don't want to comment on the statement, and I don't want to sort of say this is wrong, but we have one number. And we've just learned a lot since then. To literally close an entire school system based on one number, to me, is a flaw. We've learned too much. And that's my major issue, not necessarily the number, which I'm not necessarily crazy about either, but we just have so much more data and we're evolving the system. And that would maybe be something that maybe we can to agree upon, but we'll continue the conversation. Courtney, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to second a lot of what's been said. That 3% number was set back this summer as part of the agreement and the contract, and I acknowledge that. But one of the hallmarks of our COVID era is having to constantly reassess our policies based on the new data and the new science that's coming in. And I just failed to see why this wouldn't also require reassessment. And so I think part of what we could be doing is encouraging that reassessment. I also think that kind of the micro targeting, it's confusing to me why when the numbers first started to go up, we accepted that we could micro target it a bit. And while I understand that there is going to be some threshold at which that's no longer possible, I do think getting some health officials to weigh in on that would be helpful. And then lastly, I would just say that I read something that in which the mayor said that any reopening would probably involve an increase in testing in our schools in order to make sure that we keep tabs on this and keep it under control. And if that's the case, that feels like something that can be discussed, but should be being discussed to keep it back, because this is both a kid issue, but I actually would also add it is an adult issue for parents who can't work. And we've spent a lot of time this fall and summer talking about equity. I would also point out that there's a real difference between the people who can afford to throw some money at this problem and the many people who cannot, and the impact on the adults and the workforce for this kind of last minute closure and the scrambling that it's going to require of the parents is really unacceptable. And to have it have no end and no ability to plan around this is really untenable for working parents. And so I do think there is some and should be some impetus, and I understand the need to have it be open, but I do think there's a time sensitivity for the families that are really struggling and scrambling on this one. So my two cents.
So I don't see anyone else actively speaking. You could join in, but I will pick up on what Courtney said and start. Mark, and that is, Mark, I think you know that I've been one of the bigger sort of due diligence. We've got to, I'm not the big fan of it's an emergency and we sort of need to do it now. But I would just disagree in the sense of, and I think I'm hoping we can find a middle ground, but I think timing is an issue. This just closed today. There is no guarantee that this doesn't go on 3 months, 2 months, 2 weeks. And so for that reason, I put it in the category of, I think there's a sense of urgency. And if you're a parent, I guarantee, and maybe a kid too, but I guarantee you have a sense of urgency. So this would be one of the few times that I believe making a statement is important. And I think Mark, that I very much do not go that way very often. My feeling is I would like to make a resolution and a statement. And I think what if that resolution, but I also agree that we should do a meeting next month, and I would like to get more data. But I think timing is of extreme importance. And my feeling is if a statement is somewhat about continuing to talk, to pick up, as Doug said, about a better process, like we said last month, but bring that bring that a little bit more. And I do see some more hands up, so I'm going to get to Catherine. I see you, and Arjun, I see you as well. But perhaps the statement is more along what Cuomo has basically been saying, which is, and again, I'm speaking a little unfocused. One of the things that was said is that I watched the press conference. De Blasio said, now that we're closed, we're going to have to figure out what's the new process, what's the new methodology. And it sort of opens up the door for, my feeling is that saying that I would like them to be taking in more of these data points. And as they look to reopen schools and as they look to evolve this process, that we have grown in, and there's other data points that should be taking in. I don't need to condemn a number at 3 point, but I do feel that I feel strongly personally that I would want them to know that I feel this way, that this is not one number blanketed across the entire thing is wrong. We should evolve that process, evolve that data. We have new data, we have new understanding, and encourage everyone to work together to find something else, which is basically what kind of Cuomo's saying. I'll pause there. I'll let some other people speak, and we'll kind of go back. Catherine, did you want to add something? I thought I saw your hand up, and now it's down.
I feel like we definitely need more information. And I also agree from public health experts. And I also agree, and I agree with Mark's point about process. I also agree with Steve about the urgency. It's really dangerous for kids to be out of school. It's especially difficult for low-income families or kids who don't have parents, or for kids who are in unsafe situations, for kids who don't have technology. So what if we were to write some sort of statement to the effect of kind of asking for what the administration should be doing to improve the process for schools and families and those who support kids. I don't think we should make claims about the numbers. I just don't think we have enough information about what's safe or not. But I think we could right now make a statement about process. Our process is so small, but the city should be doing that right now. So I think we could make an argument about process right now to try to encourage the city to be better and protect kids because being out of school is dangerous for a lot of kids. And it's, as Courtney said, it's like really chaotic right now. So could we make a statement? Would people feel comfortable writing a resolution or making some sort of statement about process in the next 2 weeks?
I mean, I certainly, that's what I'm advocating. And just to be clear, I'm not advocating saying 3 point is wrong and 5 point because I'm not educated enough. So I think we're saying the same thing, which is, I'd like to see their process and decision-making evolve. and however we articulate that, I would want to try and get a compromise. I'm not advocating telling anybody anything, but I am advocating making a statement. So I see Arjun, did you want to speak now? You could just
Yeah.
unmute yourself because you're here.
Yeah, I just want to second what everyone else has been saying. I feel like the general goal is to get the most amount of kids in front of like a synchronous class in one way or another. And whether it's through getting people to actually go to school or at home learning, I feel like there also needs to be a side of this that like that talks about at home learning too, because like I have a little brother at home and he's in 2nd grade. He goes to PS 199, and what I see him at today was a synchronous day, and I'm working full synchronous too. The amount of Zoom time he has is nothing close to the amount of time he has when he goes to school. And going back to the equity point, like the more time that I feel a kid is in front of a camera, even though like screen time and all of that is bad, eyesight, whatever, I feel like there's also accountability and less there's less work the parents have to do too. And I feel like we should be encouraging schools to move towards more synchronous activities on virtual days, because like what are the correct me if I'm wrong, but what are teachers doing all day other than being a teacher? It's not like they have other things that they're supposed to be doing. I feel like there is definitely a way for us to have more synchronous Zoom time when kids are at home.
Great. Well, thank you, Arjun. Mark, did you want to say something or?
Well, I think probably I should wait to the end, but the thought that while the goal of having more synchronous time is absolutely correct, and I would endorse that, the environment, the natural result of the problems that we identified last month is that teachers are preparing for 3 different lessons, only one of which they're going to deliver. That they are preparing for at least 2 different environments, maybe 3, than the one that they'll actually be employed with. So the disruption that everyone feels is, in my view, as equally visited upon classroom teachers as it is on anybody else. And when you add to that the notion that they are also being asked, it's often lost in the shuffle about infection rates among children. What's often lost is that there are vulnerable populations who are our teachers who are being drawn into those buildings. And we heard from our principals how many, at least one of those buildings had a huge number of faculty that had to opt out because of concerns for their own health. So while I have the floor, I'll just throw in my 2 cents worth. What I think might be a fair statement that we could extrapolate from previous statements and also get out relatively quickly, as opposed to a resolution that has to go through full board, would be something to say that now that you've closed the schools, and maybe make some, maybe advert indirectly to, based on criteria that very few people had visibility to until it was decided. But now that you've done it, the process of deciding what to do next ought to incorporate all the voices that need to be in that room. We've already advocated for the role of principals to be a more meaningful part of that conversation. I think it would not be a stretch from our previous statements to say that parents or some recognized representative of parents, and I know that that's a dangerous thing because there are parents on every side of every issue. When I was a boy, we used to talk about college students protesting, and half of them protested one thing and half of them protested the other side. So with that acknowledgement that parents in some formal way need to be a part of this process, and that administrators need to be a part of that process, both principals and superintendents. And to bring it back to that, I think is a fair comment on previous statements we've made, and one that we could get out relatively quickly. Going on to talk about, as I think I was hearing, going on to talk about whether 3 is the right number, or whether they ever should have agreed to 3, or how we got to where we are now, is something that I think that we would need to hear a whole lot more about from at least from our community, and probably from somebody who's a lot smarter about this than me. So that's kind of where I hear, that's what I think I can pull out of what I'm hearing in terms of a safe process or an appropriate process. That's where I'll stop talking.
I did want to clarify, because what you're saying, because I do want to do a resolution. And I think what you're saying at the end is not what I want to do. I do not want to say that 3-point is wrong. I do not want to say that. What I think is, what I would like to do is create a resolution, I'd like to do is create a resolution that talks about process, that can incorporate the first part of what you said. But I would like to encourage the DOE and the mayor to include, to evolve their process of how they're evaluating closing schools. And that would include new data points that have been discovered, such as we now know these rates that are in schools, new thinking around micro areas as opposed to a one large area. But I don't need to say what that number should be, but I think evolving the decision-making process past a singular number, and now that they're closed, in order to reopen them, in which they open the door to say, we're going to have to look at this in a new way, encouraging them to be looking at other data points to bring in. And that's what I'd like to say. But I am not trying to say that what they've done is wrong. And I'm not trying to say what those numbers should be. I'm just trying to say that we have learned a lot since this number has come forward, and they should be applying those learnings to reopening the schools and for the year. And that was what I'd like to do. And sure, Shelley. You're muted, buddy.
We might say that if, since we don't think children should be evaluated on one criteria, that closing schools shouldn't be closed
perhaps
based on one criteria.
I'd be happy to add any of that. I see some more hands going up. Doug, go ahead.
I'm not on your committee, but I've been giving this a lot of thought. I think we all have, just about, I'm just seeing that Los Angeles is shutting down now. And has the mayor or the governor or the DOE made any specific, were there any specific medical epidemiological justifications for this? Because, even if this is in my non-medical professional thinking about this, even if I see Courtney's hand there, is he thinking that the numbers are lower in school? If the numbers are higher?
What I read is that he called this in some interview at part of the social contract that he'd made back this summer.
I will just factually say that there's been, because I've listened to everything on it, that there has been no other correlating data other than this is the number, and this is the number we decided back in May. So there's no other data that is like end. And there are other stuff. I know Julian brought up concerns in the future, and that's all true. But I can factually say that the schools are closing because this 3-point number is hit. This was a number that was decided back in May. And my feeling is there's a tremendous amount of other ways and data that have evolved, and that should be evolved. I'm not saying what it should be, and I'd like to have a meeting to educate myself, but there is more data out there now. We've learned a lot, and I want to take that into consideration.
What I was just thinking this through was that if the general population in the New York local area, if the rates are higher than 3%, and then, because it's obviously not compartmentalized. If the schools numbers are low, which is great, the kids are not separate from the general public, right? They're going to come back out into the general public through the transportation in their homes and families. And is it something that everybody kind of looked at and they don't want to panic the city and went, look, this can't happen because it's bilateral. It's not just, these are just open questions that I'm just thinking and just logical.
So in order to use this time, if we want to go offline, I can give you tons of my perspective. And to Mark's point, I'm not even saying what data points should be. So maybe all those data points should be in. I just want to encourage them to move past one number to close the school for 1 million kids. And it was, I believe, an arbitrary, whether it's the right number or not isn't even my point. I just think when you are there, we're always saying, oh, we're evolving, we're learning, we're evolving, we're learning, we're evolving. You have to evolve. This to me is an obsolete process. And this is what Cuomo said multiple times. So I'm just saying that because maybe he carries more weight than Steve Brown. But he has said this. That was his signal, is you guys should be looking at the multiple numbers. We've learned quite a bit, and as you evaluate it. But my feeling is that shutting a school system down and doing the things we're doing for the 300,000 that are in and the parents that are involved should evolve. We've learned. If we're sitting here in April and we're closing it down again, it would be ridiculous. I mean, it'd almost be a year later, and we would have all these ways of looking at things. And that's the way that what I want to do. I'm sorry, Julian, did you want to speak again?
Catherine's had her hand up for the long time. So Catherine, if you want to go first.
You're up. I mean, Catherine will speak again. If you want to speak, speak.
Julian, that's so considerate and sweet. Thank you. But it would have been fine if you spoke first too. I think that we have to have, I think there is urgency that we shouldn't, I think that we should have a robust meeting next month and invite schools and principals and teachers and definitely experts in public health to have a conversation before we make a statement about the technical aspects of what the criteria is that shuts down schools. But I think there is urgency to kids being kept out of school. And I think we could argue for, I think we could make a process argument to advocate for what we think would improve the process from input to research to communication with families. The other point, though, that's really important is that we don't know what the Department of Education and the mayor's office is working on in terms of changes to the criteria. I know I saw the mayor speak about this, and he said that they are going to have much higher standards. Courtney mentioned testing. We don't know what they're doing. And so I think we should try to find out or just be mindful of that. And I think if we were to write something and advocate for something, we should advocate for more communication or understanding about what's happening for kids. The only thing that I hear is that meals are still available, but I'm really worried about kids that are in unsafe situations or were families who don't have childcare and or don't have technology. I'm really worried about that. Around 80% of kids in the New York City public school system qualify for free or reduced price lunch. And that means that they're very poor. And so I'm worried about kids out of school. And so I think we should address if the DOE hasn't communicated about what's happening for them. And then 3, Mark, you mentioned the importance of the DOE including administrators and parents. Two additions to that. One is that teachers have to be included because they're the ones that are actually doing the work. Principals are managing them, but it's teachers that are interfacing with kids and are actually doing the educating, or they're really important on the ground. So they should definitely be included. And I think that as a committee, we have to be careful to adjust our language to account for the fact that a lot of kids in the school system don't have parents that they live with. So we can say parents and families or parents and guardians, but a lot of kids in the system don't have parents, but there are people that care for them and take care of them. So I think we should use like the word families and guardians as much as possible. So I support taking some sort of action as long as we account for what we don't know, and we're advocating for kind of improved process and communication about what the city is doing for the kids and families.
Okay, why don't we, am I muted? No, okay. So let's have Julian, and then we'll figure this out, and we'll figure what role we'll take. So Julian?
Yeah, I agree with Catherine on a lot of what she said. I think definitely a process argument should be made, I think, and I think we can make that at this meeting. My concern with the resolution is not that I disagree with you, Stephen, because I actually completely agree with you on everything. It's just that I think we could make a stronger resolution if we waited a meeting, and I wouldn't want us to, you know, pass a resolution in committee and then bring it to full board, and then by the time we pass it, like the resolution ends up being very wishy-washy and vague about using other data points and doesn't actually make a point. And then by the time that it gets passed to full board, like maybe we'll have the information that we need to make a more concrete resolution. And I just feel like a resolution might be able to be more impactful if we could, you know, as Catherine said, have people giving feedback. And it doesn't mean necessarily we have to propose a percentage. I don't think we need to do that, but I think like just knowing like the options on the table could be useful, and knowing like what the other situations are. And I also think like if we were able to in a resolution basically say we don't think it should be a citywide number, we think it should be a local number, I think that's a position we could take. I don't think it's a position we can take tonight because I don't think we have enough like knowledge for that. But I think if we waited a month, we could eventually take that position. I think that would be a stronger position that could more easily lend to advocacy efforts. So that was my only point. And just one more, this is definitely a futile point for me to make, but I am a very strong proponent of student voice, and I really advocate for including students in this process. When I think of the school system and I think of the entities involved, you know, there's teachers, there's other school staff, and there's students who are involved, and parents are amazing resources, but they experience the education from a secondary standpoint, and so the experiences that they're advocating for are experiences that their children are hearing. And I've actually, you know, it's a little crazy, but I would totally advocate for elementary school students being on school leadership teams and like being involved in all of this. I am for student voice all the way. And there are, and I think student voice is taken seriously. There are advisory members on PEP. If you've been following the news, you know, members of a student group, Teens Take Charge, filed a federal lawsuit against the DOE recently. So I think student voice should be taken seriously, and if we're going to advocate for more inclusion of different stakeholders in the process, I think we should advocate for more student inclusion. Maybe not from a necessary like input or vote perspective, but more from a gathering feedback perspective, which I think the DOE has done in the past and could continue to do, but for this, you know, specific issue.
I think Arjun is getting motivating Julian to speak more today. You know, he's very verbose. So, no, thank you for your thoughts. Always trying to make the meeting a little lighter. So please take my little teasing. Look, lastly, I'm going to leave and I'm going to add a point and then move forward. Listen, in a perfect world, Julian, I agree with everything you're saying, but I'm looking. You got to look at the timeline. Today's the 19th, so if we are going to talk about doing this next month, you're talking about the 16th. By the time we would vote, get speakers on the 16th, our next meeting, I think, is on the 5th or maybe even the 12th of January. So the first time we will make a statement about this is the middle of January. That is a problem that's way off.
Do we have a committee meeting in December?
Yeah, but if we have a committee meeting in December that will pass a resolution, then it has to go to full board, which will be voted on in the beginning of January.
Yeah.
And by the time it all comes, you're January. And trust me, from my perspective, that's a decade away. I mean, and whatever's going to happen is going to be well done. I mean, any statement we're going to make is, in my mind, is going to be obsolete at that point. Because whatever they're going to do, they're going to do. I think whatever they're going to do is going to do over the next 2 weeks. I believe the next 2 weeks, and I've spoken to other people that I think are relatively in the room, the next 2 weeks are the most crucial to what is going to happen for these kids. And that is why if anyone knows me, Felicia, I'm usually pretty pliable. I'm very adamant. The next 2 weeks, in my mind, are crucial to what is going to happen. And I'm very concerned that somehow this is going to be converted to we're just closing it down for the year. I have deep concerns that are happening, and I hear there's many advocates that are trying to make that case, that are going to use the temporary closing of this to basically say, let's just close for the year. It's the best thing and we can manage ourselves. And I don't want to close for the year. I don't believe that should happen. So that's why I'm advocating. If I could have thrown together experts, you want to know, I tried calling some up over the last couple of days to try and get into this meeting. I would have loved to have had them. But the idea, I know we're going to move on. I know where people are saying we can vote on it and we'll just let the votes go. I would like to do a resolution. That resolution will be about the process of the decision making. It would be a twofold conversation, the process of the involvement of the kids and students and all the things that we said. But I would like to include that the decision making process in terms of evaluating schools should be brought in to take in the newer data, the newer understanding, the evolution of the way that we're looking at COVID. I'm not asking to make any, I just want to be clear because I've heard this multiple times. I'm not advocating that any data point is wrong. I'm not advocating of what it should be. Just that there is new data and there's new ways of looking at things and we should be taking into consideration. Look, for all I know, they could raise everything, but they could say it's higher, but the way that we look at this has evolved, and I want to encourage the people to understand that the community wants to see all of this. What we want the scientists to make a decision. We want the data to dictate the decision. We want all the things we keep hearing, and that's all I'm advocating for. I'm not advocating for any number. So I don't know what the process is, Mark. Normally they've gone a little smoother. This is a resolution I would like to move forward on and vote it on. And you just, you need to educate me a little. And do I just vote or what's the process? Does it need to be second or you tell me?
So you've proposed a resolution, I take it. I've got to tell you that I'm troubled by it because you only get to do this once. So if there's data that you think you need in order to have a more informed opinion, you're not going to have that second chance. You can hold another meeting, but if you bring a motion or a resolution to full board in December and again in January on basically the same facts, the second one is not going to be taken seriously. Which is why I was advocating for a letter that expanded upon something that we've already said, which doesn't preclude the possibility of a second. I am very troubled that there's only 16 of us in the room when we're talking about this, and that there was nothing on the agenda that gave anybody a clue that they should weigh in on that. No fault, no recrimination. It's just the reality of this happened this morning. And I have a different take on, I think that the fast action that one can take is a letter that emphasizes the things we've already said, as opposed to trying to raise too many new points. I think that calling for more voices in the room, and that those voices need to be taken seriously. And Catherine is correct that teachers should be a part of that. The UFT is kind of their representative. That's the one person they are talking to, but maybe they should do it again. Julian is right. I'm not sure I'm going to go with the first graders, but certainly the high school students, I would trust to be responsible. Calling for those voices to be in is what I think is something I think we can say. But if you're the chair of the committee, if you think that what we should be doing is doing a resolution, then propose it, take a vote, and it'll be discussed at full board.
Steve, can I just add something to what Mark just said?
Yeah.
The UFT doesn't, I realize it's the teachers union. I taught for years in New York City public schools. I never had any contact with them at all. And they didn't represent my point of view. And so we can't just say, okay, the UFT is involved. We don't, teachers have a voice. It's just not true. I had zero contact with them. And they didn't represent me. So we can't, just like the mayor, just like the chancellor doesn't represent all schools. And if the chancellor speaks, principals are covered, the teachers aren't covered just because UFT says something. That's just my perspective as a former New York City public school teacher. The other thing that I think we could call for is more information about what's happening for these kids that are now no longer in school, that are going to be missing instruction. The technology issue hasn't been resolved. and care for them, because schools are the conduit for all social services. So we have zero information on that, right? Or what the plan is. So I think we could act now. Steve, I'm curious what you think about Mark's suggestion to write and publicize a letter. Like, can you explain why you prefer to do a resolution? And then my final comment is that we absolutely can do a resolution twice. We can do one and then we could do another. It doesn't have to be one or the other. So those are just my thoughts. But Steve, can you explain why you want to do a resolution instead of a, and I think Julian's comments are correct. Students have to be involved, and student voices are the ones that are in school, right? School's for them. And then the other piece, what was the other piece? Hold on. The other thing, I don't have it. Julian's other point was that was concern about being vague, but I think we could be very explicit about how the process needs to be improved from the perspective of the public, of people that are invested in education, including the primary stakeholders, the students, and the teachers and families. And we could do a more specific resolution when we have more information. And when policy changes, because in 2 months, in January, it's going to be a totally different situation, as Steve said.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to, Doug, I'm going to let you speak left. I know Paul's been listening. Paul wrote in the chat that he would want a resolution to include all students who have equal access to education and technology. So I did want to acknowledge his point. I'll let Doug speak and then I'll answer your questions and then we'll figure this out.
It just, after listening to everyone talk about resolution, or I think we're calling it a letter or a statement, it appears to me when we think of timelines that if we want to get the best bang for our buck, we shouldn't make the perfect the enemy of the good. And we would want to communicate a clear message in line with what we've discussed in the form of a resolution, if for no other reason than the timeline that Stephen discussed. If we don't come out with a resolution today, we're not going to have a chance to come out with a resolution until January. And by that point, we're done with the semester. And I think, Stephen, to your point, we are likely already past the decision-making cycle for the next semester. So it just so happens that the decision was made today. It just so happens that we have our Yale committee today. And because of the timelines, if we want to make a significant statement, this was, from my perspective, the opportunity to make a statement and not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Thanks. And so, Courtney, Catherine, to your question, Doug sort of advocated my position. I feel strongly about a resolution from a timing perspective. If we had to write, if there was multiple resolutions, so be it. And if that's something we didn't, but I would rather do a resolution now and follow up with a letter in January. But I feel a super sense of urgency about what's going on, and I think it's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. And if you want to know, I'd like to make the resolution stronger, and I'm trying to find a ground that everyone's comfortable with. I would be taking a more active resolution, but I'm tempering that down. But I know we've been talking about this a while, and I appreciate it. Natasha, did you want to? I know you didn't have a chance to say something. I see your hand up, and I'm not sure if
yeah.
Let's let you speak, and then we'll figure this out. I've said it a couple times, but I think we're all starting to repeat ourselves a little bit.
No, I just wanted to briefly say that I'm also in favor of a resolution. I think timing is very important here. And if we go into December and then January, the holidays in December, I don't really think it'll have much impact. So I would be in favor of a resolution tonight.
Great, thanks. So does it need to be second, Mark, or does it just move forward, or how does that work?
Technically, yes, but I think you just heard a second, so go ahead.
Okay, so what I would like to do is to put a resolution. It is a sort of I would call it a process resolution that would then reiterate, including all the voices that we wanted, which are students, which are parents, which are teachers, everyone that we feel has not been included, and talk about how that inclusion process has to increase. And the second part is that as we decide to open up schools, that we expand what are the decision makers to new data that's been proposed, new understandings, new ways of looking at things, whether they be those numbers that are coming out of the schools, whether it be things about micro areas, but to expand the process to opening up to evaluating it, but not give direction in what that is. As a compromise, to be candid, I'd be a little more strong, but I'm trying to find a middle ground. That's what I'm proposing. So do we just, you tell me? Okay, so I guess we'll take a vote. So those in favor, I guess we do committee members first, who want to vote, who want to support that, then let's vote. So
are we voting in support of your statement? Sorry, I didn't understand the process.
We're voting. Do you want to vote for the resolution that I just described? Okay.
And Steve, you're going to pass this around so we have a chance to look at it and give feedback, and you'll be open to that feedback.
Of course. Aren't we always? We're a very collaborative group here. This is the first little,
100%.
the first little
Yeah.
back and forth we've ever had in the YEL. Maybe it's a little fun, but yeah, of course we would let everyone be involved.
Okay.
Okay. So I see Doug, I see Courtney, I see
You're
Bev.
asking for yes.
We're asking for yeses.
Yeah, my hand is up as well.
Okay. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, I think. We have Bev and 6 and Rosa. So I see 6 yeses. Am I right? I may be even under it. No, there's 7, including me. Yes, that's 7 yeses. Natasha, Rosa, Bev, Catherine, Courtney, Doug, and me, 7. Okay? And those against? Oh, and I don't know, Paul, I don't know if you're still here and you want to put where you stand. If you were yes, it could be wherever it wants, but why don't you just put, okay, got it. So against from the committee?
Looks like it's just Paul.
Okay. Then Julian, were you a yes, or you or then there's abstaining? Okay, so Julian's going to abstain. Okay, so it's 7-1-1, and then non-committee members. Yes. So I see that's 1. Noes. That's 1, and abstaining. That's 1. Well, we're across the board. Okay. Well, that was a spirited discussion. Listen, Mark, I would say that we'll be at board, so there will be an opportunity for everyone to speak more at board, and candidly, perhaps there'll be new data points and new things that evolve. But I'm very pleased that we were able to do this.
So the only thing I'll say to you is that next week is a short week, and the full board comes right after the holiday. So this does need to get circulated and done, and to Penny, because we are under significant pressure from now on to have all of our resolutions on our website before the meeting. So just please keep that timing in mind as we move forward.
Catherine, did you want to say something?
Can we write this really fast and share it with schools or students? Julian, do you have any ideas how we can get more student input on this? Do you have any thoughts?
Specifically like Upper West Side, like Community Board 7 area feedback, maybe you could go to the Model C C3. That's the only designated location-based youth group. But then again, I think we have a really quick timeline. I think it just might be better if we run through this as a committee first, and I can try to provide.
I think we could.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Julian.
Go ahead.
I think we could reach out to schools, though, local schools that we're in communication with, Steve, just to get their thought, ask them. They probably know more than we do. And get people to come to full board to share their thoughts.
All right, well, let's get this together quickly. I may reach out to a couple of those because I know Mark normally writes these, and I'm not going to sort of ask Mark to write something that he didn't really sort of support.
It would be a bad process, don't you think? Yeah.
So I may be needing to reach out to a couple people. And so what I've always said is I'm a really good editor, but a terrible writer. And maybe Mark will support me on that. But I'll think through the next day or so how to figure this out. Yeah, I understand the timeline, and we'll get something out. So with that, I mean, any other new or old business? Generally, we talk about next meeting. I think the next meeting hopefully will be more in depth about this. And if anybody has ideas or guest speakers, we're always looking. I know, Catherine, you and Shelley, may know some health people to speak about it. I'm going to do it, but perhaps my idea is to have the meeting anyway that we want to have, even though this is where we're at. And I would certainly appreciate any thoughts or any ideas on who would be about relevant people. But let's get as many people as we can, including, health officials that may be able to speak about this.
You might want to have a person from the mayor's office, liaison, to explain what they're doing and what
I think we're going to reach out to all the regular folks I've found, and Mark can clarify. I don't think we've gotten any luck from the DOE to show up for anything that we've asked about, candidly. So I'm open to any thoughts. But yeah, I mean, it would be great to have someone from the DOE, it'd be great to have someone from teachers, it'd be great to have parents and anybody who has any ideas about people that can help us. Everyone kind of knows I'm always asking for help.
Well, I think you also want someone from that group that's that's discussing it, and making decisions without us, to share what their thinking is at that point.
If we can get them in the room, I would be ecstatic.
We'll lasso them.
Doug, did you have an idea?
I just wanted to just say how how big this is. This is the largest public school system in the United States. This is national news.
Absolutely.
This is being discussed all over the country and questioned whether, so I just wanted to echo how important and how huge this is.
I couldn't agree enough. I mean, I think what happens here out in New York will have a ripple impact on all the major school systems, and the fact that we paused it, I think, will just have an impact either way. Natasha, was there something you wanted to say before we close up?
Yeah, I did. I don't know if Blanche is still on the call.
She's not on.
Okay, but I thought I remembered her saying that the December agenda would be something, it would have something to do with community organizations serving the youth and how they've been impacted by the diversion of funds to them from, the NYPD, et cetera. Am I completely wrong?
No, you're not completely wrong. I think it was more of the way that we've been doing our meetings is to kind of start to visualize them and say, maybe this will be this and this. And we're trying to always sort of divide between our mandates, youth education libraries. But there's been no speakers reached out to. There's been no, and I do know it's a passion of yours and one we've talked about in the past. My plan probably is that this may sort of usurp that and push it off. And I don't think that Blanche is going to have a problem with that. And if it's something that that upsets you or you want to talk about, then why don't we speak offline and maybe there was a way to accomplish it. But I do acknowledge that this is a topic that you have wanted to talk about in the past.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, it is an important topic and also very timely in its own way. So
understood. Had this not kind of came up, I think that was like how we were thinking about doing it, but it might be amended.
Please forgive me for jumping in. I just happen to have the television on in the background, and Anderson Cooper is interviewing Bill Gates, and it's right over the television. Bill Gates, shutting New York City school systems is a wise move, and I'm curious to know what he's saying. It's literally right this moment.
All right, well, you can fill us in. Okay, I'm starving, so I didn't eat yet, and it's 9, so I'm gonna go to eat. I appreciate everyone's dialogue. And I wish, this is such a great committee because I love it that we have a little conflict, but we always seem to come to an end and everyone's got a smiling face in the sense of we may not all get exactly where we want to get. But I think we figure out a path going through, and I'd love to see that in some other committees that are a little push and pull. And I think that sometimes even the board can be so. So I'm just very proud of the way that we work through conflict in this committee. And I want to thank everyone for their voices.
Well, and it comes from the top, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, have a great night, everyone.
Good night.